Hey, it's a slave labor market. We get these little jobs and we get like $15 a month, low end. It provides employment for depressed rural areas. So you get a place like Taft, you know. If it wasn't for the prison, there would be no industry here. You know, the oil industry is gone, long gone. There's nothing else here, you know, except maybe the ground squirrel industry. Conviction rate is almost 100%. And people that are doing the longest time here are the ones that had a strategy, that went to court and fought it and lost.
Why in the world do we have millions of innocent young people wasting away in prison when the big people who are committing these huge, atrocious crimes are getting away every day?
All of this is a massive deception. It's a massive profit scheme.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
They can't even keep drugs out of the prison system. You know, they have guys in prison that ODs and things of that nature, even in the home.
The war on drugs is in part a money-making scheme. It's a corrupt war that goes on all day, every day, but not once is it focused on by the media. Instead, they keep you distracted with entertainment and bickering, even bickering over marijuana, something that has already been settled but ignored by Nixon. Bickering over the marijuana issue is like two women in a boxing ring, fighting over who gets to marry a man who has been dead for over 70 years, but his death is only known to those responsible for putting the fight together. Today, they finally say, "We've failed at the drug war," as if it were an accident. After 1 year of fighting, they received a wealth of information on the effectiveness of their actions. After another year, they received an increase of information regarding the effectiveness of their actions. After year 3 they received another increase. After 4 or 5 years of having no effect, someone who really wanted to succeed would have reevaluated their mission. True or false? But they continued for almost 20 years. If they continued with absolutely no positive effect for almost 20 years, then you have clear evidence that this outcome was, and is, desired. You can't do something such as this for 20 years unless it was intentional. You can accidentally do a bad job at something for 20 years. And yet, you believe it.
Miami is a major transportation center and is easily reached by all forms of travel.
In the late 1970s, thousands of illegal and legal South American immigrants started entering Miami.
The Latin American influence has given Miami a unique flavor.
Miami had by then been established as an environment where a Spanish speaker only could thrive. Miami has always been sort of a piratey, kind of fiercely independent environment where law and order was never championed.
Like a virgin city.
South Florida boy, and one of the few that's that old that was born here. I was in the import business. Do your archaeology, you dig down, you'll find the gun runners, and then you'll find the rum runners, and you'll find the marijuana, and you'll find the Cuban immigrants, and you'll find the cocaine. This city has always had something coming in.
South Florida is the nearest U.S. mainland destination for South American drug smugglers.
It was wide open back then.
It was wide open.
There is mile after mile of unguarded shoreline where a boat can drop drugs undetected.
The narrator of that video segment knew how unguarded it was, but the government didn't.
In the 70s, when I first came down here, everybody in Florida was smuggling potted.
The Drug Enforcement Agency believes 95% of all marijuana smuggled into the United States comes through South Florida.
The DEA believed this, or in other words, knew this, but as an agency on a mission to stop drugs, especially the dangerous marijuana, somehow they didn't jump on the opportunity to stop 95% of that dangerous marijuana from coming in. And stop it just by focusing on the southern portion of one state.
A friend of mine passed away, In his warehouse, he had 2,000 pounds of marijuana. What I did is I went in and took it. I didn't really know anybody in the business. I gave half of it to somebody, and I gave the other half to somebody, and I split it with them. If you were making $10,000 a year, you were doing pretty good. If you were making $20,000, you were doing phenomenal. I think I had like $165,000. So you're talking about 8 years' salary. Ba-boom. And I said, this is pretty nice. There's got to be something more to this. It was too easy, and you could drive in with a boat, stacked up, pull up to the dock and unload it. Nobody said a thing. There was no defense of the border to speak of.
And at the present rate, according to some economists, the state's major industry could soon be drug smuggling.
You could be out in a boat and find bales of marijuana floating. I mean, the proverbial square grouper. We stayed in the pot business until it got to the point where there was so much pot here that you couldn't sell it.
We got more drugs today than we did 10 years ago, and that's got to tell you that there is something bigger that's not being shown.
In 1972, when Richard Nixon started the war on drugs, the federal budget allocation was $101 million. Going into fiscal year 2000, the federal budget allocation was $20 billion. Yet there were more drugs in the country in 2000. They were of better quality and they were less expensive than they were in 1972. What's wrong with that picture?
Researchers, investigators, government officials, members of U.S. intelligence, and others will look dead in a camera and tell you every single way drugs enter the country. The use of bait cars at borders, the drops into water using homing beacons, concealment in ships, etc., and still, they can't stop it? Think about that for a moment. They know but can't stop it. Huh?
During McCaffrey's reign under Bill Clinton, literally millions of nonviolent pot smokers were arrested and sentenced. And even if you still don't recognize Barry, everyone remembers Barry's classic "This is your egg brain on drugs" anti-drug campaign.
The metaphor of the drug war led to flawed thinking. I was invited a few years ago, when General McCaffrey was the drug czar, to be involved in a debate. He bragged with a smile on his face that the budget for his office, namely the Office of National Drug Control Policy, was getting an increase in funding from $17 billion per year to something like $18.5 billion per year. Can you imagine how much money that is? And if you expect somebody that controls that much money to be in favor of change, look again. Of course not, because money is power.
If the government truly wanted to stop the flow of drugs into the country, they could simply use the FBI, CIA, NSA, and other agencies against drug families and organizations in the same devious manner it does against its own citizens who reveal their dirty deeds or strive for liberty and justice for all. You as a citizen can't even fly from one city to another in the same state without going through more searches and security measures than someone crossing the border. You actually believe the border has to be that way? Have you questioned why it doesn't look like airport security on steroids? Based on what the government says, shouldn't it? Couldn't it? They could create more jobs. They could use more sophisticated equipment. They can't direct some of those billions in unneeded defense spending toward high-tech borders? It doesn't look like airport security on steroids because what you see is desired wanted intended. People in power bring in drugs. The people involved in the shipping and distribution get paid. Banks launder the money and get paid. Businesses in cities get paid when top-level dealers and traffickers spend money in that city. The DEA gets paid when they fight against drugs. Privately owned corporations get paid when a citizen gets caught with a drug and imprisoned. The more prisoners, the more money. Owners of stock in all of the entities involved in this process get paid. The county the private prison is built in gets paid. The citizens of the county the private prison is built in get paid through employment. Private corporations get paid when they contract with businesses to have their prisoners perform a task for pennies on the dollar. Businesses who hire prison labor get paid when they save on labor costs. Special police units get paid by the arrests they make. So, You actually believe they want to get rid of drugs? LMAO.
With every passing day of this drug war, the battle line seems to be getting harder and harder to see. And yet it's almost impossible to believe that the same rules apply to everyone. The drug warriors love to talk about illegal drugs, but what drives the motives to legalize certain harmful and equally addictive substances?
Money. Money controls this whole movement. You have a group called the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. Well, first of all, of course, we don't have a drug-free America, never have, never will. But who are the funders? Who are the main funders, source of funding for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America? Of all things, the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry. They are drugs. They are mind-altering, sometimes addicting drug-free America indeed. But why do they do that? They spend huge money to reinforce the distinction between legal drugs on the one hand and illegal drugs on the other.
Cigarettes, processed tobacco leaves which may or may not be pesticide, man-made, chemical-free or untouched by genetic engineering, laced, and that is the proper term, with man-made chemicals whose effects in the body you don't know, made created to be highly addictive. Sold in every sense of the word to the American people. And you're on it. Every day. And your own government lets the tobacco industry corporations, those who own its stocks, and those who sit on the board of directors sell this designer drug to you. The dope is sold to you. All forms of media advertise the man-made drug while refusing to call it a drug, and companies, whose products fill your home, are allowed by your government to be purchased, controlled, and created by the corporations and individuals who make the drug.
I had lost 2 family members and a best friend in a very short span of time to alcohol, cigarettes, and legal prescription drugs. So fearing that I could be next due to my own struggle with addiction, I wanted to find out why the drug war seemed to be such a huge failure.
They have you killing yourself with alcohol and cigarettes while believing and calling marijuana dangerous, and a drug. Cigarettes or marijuana, which one outweighs the other in the amount of negative effects it has on people? Clearly, it's cigarettes that outweigh marijuana, but in America, the one that is legal is the cigarettes, laced tobacco. And can you say cancer? Can you say secondhand smoke? Come on, your children are being affected. And your own government knowingly allows all of this. How many years was the tobacco industry the largest taxpayer in the U.S.? You don't want to know. It's dope money. Deary dope money. And it's a designer drug. How much money has gone from tobacco companies to the campaigns of government officials, which means giving more of a benefit to a person than someone paying someone else's way through college. You can't be elected without money. The more money, the better the chances.
Many argue there's little evidence that marijuana has medical value.
It's a handful of people who want to see not just marijuana, but all drugs legalized. When a person takes a drug, of course they feel good. That's why they take a drug. Does that mean it's medicine? Does that mean that it cures the situation? No, it doesn't.
Why is our government spending billions of our tax dollars every year to stop people from growing a plant that helps the side effects of chemotherapy?
You're looking at pharmaceuticals. This is a multi-billion dollar industry. But if you look at all the pain medications, all of the drugs that we use, probably 80% of them could be eliminated by people using cannabis.
Caffeine is a drug. It actually has more, and worse, negative effects than marijuana. And they allow the nation to overdose on caffeine. They argue that marijuana is a gateway drug. If marijuana is a gateway drug, That is, it leads to other drugs. Isn't